When I was 15, my mother told me some people are born to own things, and the rest of us are born to serve them. She said it like it was fact, a law of nature, like gravity or death. She said it with her back to me, scrubbing the same stained counter in our tiny rented kitchen until her knuckles bled. My name is Renata Kerrigan. I've spent most of my life scrubbing counters someone else owns. We lived in a small town on the edge of Yorkshire, the kind of place tourists don't stop in. People here keep to themselves. And families like mine, families that owed everyone everything, learned early to stay small. Be grateful for scraps. Never dream about deeds with your name on them. I did anyway, even when the electricity got cut off. When Mum sold my birthday necklace for the gas bill. When my sister Clara used to sneer at me for making lists of the houses I'd buy when I got rich. It became my secret rebellion. My quiet fight against the curse that shackled us to borrowed walls. By 25, I'd moved to the city. Leeds felt like a different world. I worked reception at a property management company. Ironic, really. I'd smile at the shiny-suited men who came in talking about rent rolls and profit margins, while I lived in a damp basement flat with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. After my shift, I worked evenings at a co-op grocery, the pay just enough to keep the lights on. I told myself it was temporary, that I was saving. That one day, I'd be the one signing the rent checks. But Clara was always there. Like a shadow I couldn't outrun. She'd moved back home after dropping out of uni, bouncing from boyfriend to boyfriend, each more useless than the last. She'd ring me at 3 a.m, voice thick with booze and cigarette smoke, begging for money. "You owe me, Ren," she'd say. "You wouldn't even have that job if I hadn't covered for you with Mum all those years." I used to believe her. But something cracked the day I got a call from my old landlord. Not my landlord, though. That was the punchline. He was Clara's landlord now. I was counting till receipts at the grocery when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out. "Miss Kerrigan?" His voice was crisp, with that flat Yorkshire edge that can gut you without raising its volume. "This is Ewan Rourke. I own the building your sister's living in. You're listed as her guarantor." The receipts slipped from my hand. I don't. She's 3 months behind. And I'm not a charity. The shame punched through me first. Sharp, white hot. Then the rage. I never signed anything. "That's funny. I've got your signature on file." He paused, letting that sink in. "I'd prefer to handle this quietly. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office." He hung up before I could stammer out a protest. I stood there in the staff room, the broken toaster humming behind me, the old fridge rattling, my world spinning off its axis. That night, I tore my flat apart. Old boxes, binders, anything. And there it was, my signature, photocopied onto a tenancy form, with Clara's name scrawled above mine. It was my handwriting, but it wasn't mine. She'd taken an old job application I'd filled out for her, sliced my name out like a ransom note. I didn't sleep. I barely breathed. Morning came too soon. ... His office was in one of those new-build glass towers downtown, the kind you walk past and think, someday. The lift smelled like leather and money. When the doors opened on the 15th floor, I felt like an imposter. My charity shop coat, scuffed boots, a baggy jumper that still smelled faintly of fryer grease. The receptionist looked at me like I'd tracked in something from the street. "Mr. Rourke will see you now," she said, her eyes flicking to my coat, my shoes, then back to her screen. I stepped into the office. It was colder than the corridor, all sleek marble and chrome edges. Ewan Rourke stood by the window, staring out at the city like he owned every brick. And maybe he did. "Miss Kerrigan." He turned. He was younger than I expected. Late 30s, maybe. Tall, tailored to the point of insult. "Sit." I sat. My knees bounced. "I didn't sign that," I said, before he could speak. "It's fraud. Clara." "Yes, Clara." He rolled her name around his tongue like it tasted bad. "Your sister is an interesting tenant. I'd ask you to explain her, but I suspect you can't." I swallowed. "Please. I'll pay what she owes. Just don't evict her." His eyebrow twitched. "You'd pay for her mistakes?" "I always do," I said, the words cracking out of me. He came closer, and for the first time I saw it. Something behind his eyes. Amusement. Or maybe calculation. "What do you know about property, Miss Kerrigan?" The question startled me. What? Property. Buildings. The people who keep them standing. I looked down at my nails, bitten to the quick. I know I've spent my whole life paying rent to men like you. His laugh was quiet. Honest. Good. Tell me, have you ever wanted more? I stared at him. What do you want from me? He dropped into the chair opposite mine, leaned forward and said, I have a portfolio of buildings that need more than money. They need someone who understands people like your sister, people who drain you dry if you let them. I opened my mouth, but he kept going. You're not soft, Renata. I've checked. Your references, your file here. He tapped the folder between us. You're a bulldog when you have to be. Heat rose up my neck. So you want me to do your dirty work? No, he said. I want you to do your own work. For yourself. Be the name on the lease, on the deed. Not the bottom of someone else's ledger. It was so absurd, I almost laughed. I can't afford. You will. I'll back you. It's a risk. You'll get your hands dirty. People will hate you. But at the end of it, you'll own something. My chest tightened. And Clara? He shrugged. I'll handle Clara, if you sign this. He slid a fresh contract across the table. I looked at the paper. My name. Next to his. The word partner circled in red ink. Why me? I whispered. His smile was cold. Because you're the only person in that girl's life who knows how to say no. I sat there, the weight of every debt, every lie, every time I'd bailed Clara out pressing into my bones. And then for the first time in my life, I said yes to myself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay on my back in my narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of my childhood room, the contract spread out on the duvet beside me. Edward's words buzzed through my skull like static, drowning out the old voices that said, You don't deserve this. You don't own anything. You don't build. You survive. But what if they were wrong? By dawn, the decision was made. I rose before the sun did, slipped my arms into the cheap blazer I'd worn to countless dead-end interviews, and caught the earliest bus into the city. The streets were quiet, mist curling around the old brick buildings like a secret. The block Edward wanted me to take over wasn't far from the estate where we'd grown up, close enough that I could almost hear my mother's voice, dripping scorn, telling me I was chasing smoke. I found the building at the end of a cul-de-sac, wedged between a shuttered laundrette and a corner shop that hadn't changed its signage since the 90s. 4 stories high, battered red brick, windows clouded with grime, a broken intercom. It looked like a place where hope came to die. I stood on the pavement, folder hugged to my chest, heart pounding so hard I could taste metal. Was I really about to sign for this? Take on the debt, the repairs, the tenants, who'd probably hate me the second I knocked on their doors. I heard Hannah's laugh in my head, the way she'd say, Bless her, Leora thinks she's a landlord now. My fists clenched. I went inside. The main hallway smelled of stale smoke and damp carpet. A flickering bulb cast everything in sickly yellow light. There were mail slots on each door, stuffed with takeaway flyers and final notice envelopes. I ran my fingers over the peeling paint on the banister. My building. Mine. If I made it work. The first tenant to open her door was a woman in her 60s, hair pinned back with plastic clips, eyes sharp as knives. She looked me up and down, arms crossed over a faded housecoat. Who are you, then? She demanded. Hi, I stammered. I'm Leora. Well, I'll be the new building manager. She barked a laugh that turned into a smoker's cough. Building manager? What, you're gonna fix the leaks and chase off the druggies in the stairwell? I glanced past her into the flat. Worn carpet, kids' shoes piled by the radiator, a sink full of dishes. I'm going to try, I said, and to my surprise, my voice didn't shake. She looked me dead in the eye. Good. 'Bout time someone did. Name's Marlene. Don't cock it up. And just like that, she slammed the door. I stood there, pulse roaring in my ears. I was in it now. No backing out. The next few weeks were chaos. I bounced between shifts at the hotel, late-night cleaning stints at the diner, and the flats. Patching holes, chasing up the handyman Edward reluctantly gave me funds for, trying to untangle the mess of unpaid rent and shady sublets. I knocked on doors, took shouted complaints on the chin, learned who would talk to me, and who wouldn't. I became a ghost in those halls, always moving, always listening, always watching. Sometimes I'd come home so tired my feet felt like someone else's. I'd flop onto my bed, half dreaming of rent ledgers and peeling wallpaper, only to be jolted awake by a call from Hannah. "Lo, can you watch the kids tomorrow?" "Lo, I need a loan." "Lo, don't be selfish, we're family." Family. That word used to feel warm, like a promise. Now it felt like shackles. One night, after I'd spent 12 straight hours scrubbing graffiti off the stairwell walls, I found a man sitting on the steps. Late 20s, maybe 30, wearing a hoodie and scuffed trainers, hair too neat for someone loitering in a building like this. "Can I help you?" I asked, voice sharper than I intended. He tilted his head, studying me. "You're the new manager, yeah?" I hesitated. "Who's asking?" He held out a hand. "Aiden Foster. Flat 3B. I shook it warily. His grip was firm. Warm. He smelled like aftershave and cold night air. "You've been busy," he said. "I saw you tearing out that busted pipe yesterday." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "Yeah, well, it's my job now." He leaned back against the railing. "Most folks who take over this place don't last a week." "Edward send you?" I bristled. "What's that supposed to mean?" Aiden shrugged. "Means you seem different. You look like you give a damn. People here aren't used to that." I wanted to tell him that maybe I didn't. That maybe this was just my desperate attempt to dig myself out from under Hannah's mess. But his eyes, bright, searching, made the words stick in my throat. "Why are you sitting out here, Aiden?" I asked instead. He looked away, then back at me. "My heating's been shot for a week. Place is freezing. Marlene said you'd sort it." I groaned inwardly. "Of course she did. Okay. I'll come by tomorrow." He flashed me a small smile, crooked and disarming. "Appreciate it. You're not what I expected." I frowned. "What did you expect?" "Another ghost," he said simply. Then he stood and disappeared into the stairwell, leaving me alone with the echo of his words. Over the next month, I kept at it. Little by little, the building began to feel less like a tomb and more like a home. The hallway lights stayed on. The broken lift was fixed. Mostly. The druggies in the stairwell vanished after I struck a deal with the local council to patrol the block. Rent trickled in. Not much, but enough to stop the letters with red stamps from piling up at my door. Meanwhile, Hannah's life spiraled deeper into the pit she'd dug for herself. She lost Trevor's house when he bolted. Another eviction notice on my record because of that cursed guarantor form. She came knocking at my flat one night. Mascara streaked, kids huddled behind her like frightened shadows. "Lo, I need you. Just for a bit," she pleaded. "We've got nowhere else." Every part of me wanted to slam the door, to shout at her for dragging me down again. But then Tilly peeked out from behind her legs, her tiny voice trembling. "Auntie Lo, I let them in. The kids took my bed. Hannah took my sofa." I lay awake on the floor, staring at the ceiling, feeling that old bitterness coil around my ribs. Every penny I saved went to them. Every plan I made bent around their needs. And they'd never thank me for it, never see me as more than the sister who'd always bail them out. But in the mornings, when I slipped on my boots and headed for the flats, something shifted. There, I wasn't just Leora the doormat. I was Leora the landlord. Leora the owner. I was learning, brick by brick, signature by signature, how to be something more than what they said I was. Aiden became my unexpected ally. He'd appear when I was wrestling with a burst pipe, or when a tenant tried to skip rent. He knew people, plumbers, electricians, contractors who'd work for cheap if you brought them a bottle of whiskey and a promise not to stiff them. One night, after we'd spent 4 hours unclogging a drain in Marlene's flat, he handed me a steaming cup of instant coffee. We sat on the hallway floor, shoulders touching, the damp smell clinging to our clothes. "You know," he said softly, "you're good at this." I barked a laugh. "At what? Playing savior to a building that wants to collapse on my head?" "At fighting for something," he said. "Most people here gave up a long time ago. Not you." I stared into my coffee. "I don't know how to give up," I murmured. "Even when I should." Aiden nudged me, his grin warm in the dim light. "Good. The place needs someone stubborn." Weeks bled into months. Small victories stacked up. A tenant paid on time for the first time in years. The local paper ran a tiny piece about the block's quote, 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 quote. Edward called, his voice slick and patronizing, to say he was impressed. He dropped hints about future opportunities, bigger properties, more responsibility. I said yes to everything. Not for him. For me. But with every step forward, Hannah pulled me 2 steps back. She racked up debts at the corner shop. She skipped school runs for Tilly and Oscar. When I came home late one night to find the kids alone in my flat, I nearly lost it. "Where the hell is she?" I demanded. Tilly just shrugged, hugging her stuffed bear tight. I found Hannah hours later at a pub down the road, laughing too loud, a drink clutched in her chipped nails. She looked at me, bleary-eyed, as if I were the problem. "Oh, get over yourself, Lo," she slurred. "You're not their mother." I dragged her out of there, my fury simmering like acid in my veins. As she stumbled beside me, I caught our reflection in a dark shop window. Her, a ruin wearing a pretty face. Me, the ghost who kept her afloat. That night, I lay awake on the living room floor, the kids curled up beside me. I realized, with a sharp, painful clarity, that my family would drain me until there was nothing left. But the block, that battered, stubborn building, was mine. And one day, it would be enough. Enough to stand on my own. Enough to look Hannah in the eye and say no more. I was still scribbling plans in my notebook when dawn crept through the curtains, pale and accusing. Aiden's words echoed in my head. "You're fighting for something." Damn right I was. And I was gonna win. I woke up with a start, the kids still pressed against me like tiny anchors. Their warmth made the ache in my bones bearable. For a moment, I let myself breathe them in. Oscar's soft snore, Tilly's thumb tucked stubbornly into her mouth. It was the only peace I'd get all day. By the time I got the kids fed and dropped off at school, I was already late for a meeting with Edward. He'd called me 2 days ago, his voice like a snake curling around my resolve. "We need to discuss the next step, Leora. Bring your rent ledgers." I hated that I still jumped when he asked for something. That his approval still made something in my chest flutter, even if I'd never admit it aloud. I arrived at his office, sweaty, my hair escaping its bun, my blouse sticking to my back. Edward didn't even glance up when I walked in. He was hunched over a stack of documents, the late morning sun throwing hard shadows across the oak table. "Sit," he said without looking at me. I did, clutching my folder so tightly the edges bit into my palms. He leafed through my reports with a pinched frown. "Arrears are down," I offered. "I've worked out a payment plan with Marlene, and the family in 2A finally cleared 2 months' worth." His hand shot up, cutting me off. "Don't give me excuses." My jaw locked. "I wasn't. I was giving you progress." Edward set the papers aside, steepling his fingers under his chin. "Do you know what I admire about you, Leora?" I bit my tongue. He'd never once said he admired anything about me. "You're persistent," he went on. "You dig your claws in. That's good. That's necessary. But it's also dangerous." "Dangerous?" He leaned forward, his gaze pinning me to the chair. "You're doing well, but this building is still a liability. One more tenant defaulting and the council could intervene. Or worse, a buyer could come sniffing around, waving just enough cash to tempt me to cut you out." His smile was all teeth. "I'd hate to see you lose everything you've poured into this." My hands trembled under the table. "So what do you want me to do?" Edward's eyes gleamed. "Grow. Expand. I've got another property. A row of 3 terraces near the city center. Needs a caretaker. Someone who understands tenants. Someone hungry. I stared at him. You want me to take on more debt? More risk? He shrugged. You're doing well, Leora. Better than I expected. Don't get complacent. You'll never own anything if you play it safe. I wanted to throw the chair through his window. Instead, I forced my lips into something like a smile. Send me the details. I'll think about it. Edward's grin widened, smug and satisfied. Good girl. I walked out of his office feeling like I needed to scrape his fingerprints off my skin. But as I stepped into the bright street, the sick twist in my gut gave way to something else. Defiance. He thought he had me cornered. That I'd dance every time he tugged the string. Maybe I would. For now. But I was learning. And I was keeping receipts. Dash, 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 dot, dot. Back at the flats, chaos waited like a hungry dog. Marlene was in the hallway, arms folded, glaring at a damp patch that was creeping across her ceiling. Leora, love, she barked. You told me you'd sort this leak a week ago. I raised my hands. I know. The plumber bailed. I'll chase him again tonight. She harumphed but softened when she saw the bags under my eyes. You need to sleep more, girl. Sleep's for the rich, I muttered. I trudged upstairs to check on Aiden's flat. He'd texted me that morning, something about the heating again. When he opened the door, I caught my breath. He looked tired, too. Hair rumpled, shirt half tucked, a fresh bruise blooming on his knuckles. What happened to you? I asked. He shrugged, wincing a little. Nothing. Just some idiot at the pub. You fixed the leak yet? I brushed past him, my eyes darting to the battered radiator. I've got a contractor coming tomorrow. Just hold tight one more night. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching me like he always did, like he was trying to see the parts. One kept hidden. You should get out of here tonight, he said suddenly. Let me take you for a drink. I snorted. I've got Hannah and the kids at mine. And tomorrow I'm seeing the new terraces. Terraces? His brows shot up. More property? You're a glutton for punishment. I slumped onto the arm of his sofa. It's more debt, more stress, more Edward breathing down my neck. But if I can pull it off, if anyone can, it's you, Aiden said. The way he looked at me made my stomach twist. Like I was more than the girl who scrubbed stairwells for rent money. Come on, he nudged. One drink. The world can wait an hour. I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to say yes. But Hannah's voice was already in my head, shrill and mocking. Run off and play house with your tenants, Lo. Who's gonna feed your niece and nephew, huh? I stood, forcing a smile. Rain check. Aiden didn't push. He just watched me go, that crooked grin lingering behind me like a promise. Dash, 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 dot, dot. The next morning, I took the bus across town to see the terraces. 3 in a row, sandwiched between a shuttered fish shop and a betting office. Peeling paint, overgrown gardens, windows papered with eviction notices. They looked worse than the flats had. Edward was waiting with his oily grin. See the potential? Prime location, up-and-coming area. Once you clear out the squatters and patch the roofs, you're sitting on gold. And how much debt am I signing for this time? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Nothing you can't handle, he said breezily. It's an investment. You want to be a real landlord, don't you? I wanted to tell him where to shove it, but when I stepped inside the first terrace, dank, reeking of mold, I imagined it clean. Families here instead of junkies. Rent paid on time. Me collecting the keys. Me holding the deed. Ownership. I signed. Dash, 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 dot, dot. That night, Hannah was waiting in my flat when I came home. Arms folded, eyes glittering. You look smug, she sneered. What is it now? Did Edward promise you a palace? It's none of your business, I said, brushing past her. It is when you keep throwing money at that dump while my kids eat beans for dinner, she shouted. We're family, Lo. Or did you forget? I whirled around, my fists clenched. Family? Family means you don't drag me under every time you sink. Family means you stand on your own damn feet. Her face twisted into something ugly. You think you're better than me now? Because you're playing landlord? Don't kid yourself. You'll never own anything real. I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Watch me. I locked myself in my room, her curses muffled by the thin walls. I lay awake again, my notebook open, scribbling numbers, repairs, dreams. I felt like I was piecing my bones back together, one rental payment at a time. The next morning I packed Hannah's bags. I gave her bus fare. I kissed Tilly and Oscar goodbye as they clung to my legs. Where will we go, Auntie Lo? Tilly whispered. Somewhere better, I lied. As the door slammed behind them, the silence hit me like a punch. For the first time in my life, I was alone. Terrified. Free. At that moment, Aiden knocked. He didn't say anything when he saw my red eyes. He just pulled me into his arms, warm and solid. For once, I let myself lean. You're doing it, he murmured into my hair. They'll see. One day, they'll all see. Outside, the city pulsed with the promise of everything I was about to take back. Aiden didn't say much that morning. He just stood with me in the cramped hallway of my flat, his fingers brushing mine every so often, like he was reminding me I wasn't as alone as I felt. The air smelled of stale toast and something sharper. Freedom, maybe. Or fear. I wasn't sure I knew the difference anymore. When he finally spoke, it was so quiet I almost missed it. You sure you're okay? I laughed, but it cracked halfway out of my throat. No, but I will be. Aiden nodded, that half smile ghosting across his face. Come on then, landlord. Let's go see what fresh hell you've signed up for. .. We took the bus to the terraces together. It was early enough that the city hadn't quite woken up. Shop shutters still drawn, the streets littered with last night's regrets. I watched my reflection in the window, hair tied back, dark circles under my eyes like bruises I'd earned. I didn't look like someone who owned anything, but in my pocket was the deed to 3 neglected houses. Proof I was more than what they said I was. The terraces looked worse by daylight. The gardens were overgrown jungles of brambles and beer cans. One window was boarded up with a door that had clearly been ripped from its hinges years ago. As I turned the keys in the lock of the first house, Aiden gave me a sideways glance. You're gonna need more than elbow grease for this. I shoved the door open with my shoulder. Don't suppose you know a good exorcist? He snorted. For the ghosts or the squatters? I didn't answer. We stepped inside, boots crunching over broken tiles. The hallway smelled like old damp and something sour. Somewhere deeper in the house, I heard voices. Aiden stiffened beside me. Stay behind me, he muttered. He raised his voice. Oi! This is private property now. You lot need to clear out. The voices stilled. Then a figure emerged from the shadows. Young man, maybe 19. Skin stretched too tight over sharp bones. He looked at me, at Aiden, then back at the door. You the new owner? He asked me. I'm the manager, I said. The lie tasted close enough to the truth. This place isn't a free hostel anymore. The kid shrugged, scratching at a spot on his neck. You gonna call the cops? I should have said yes, but I saw the shape of his ribs under his hoodie, the dirt under his nails, the way his eyes flicked to the empty doorway behind me like he was calculating if he could run. You've got a day, I said. Then you're gone. Aiden looked at me like I'd grown another head. The kid mumbled something like thanks and slipped past us, vanishing into the pale morning. You're too soft, Aiden said once we were alone. No, I said, moving deeper into the house. I just know how it feels to have nowhere else. .. We spent the rest of the day cataloging every nightmare the terraces threw at us. Leaking roofs, rotting joists, ancient wiring that looked like it might set the place ablaze if you so much as sneezed. My notebook filled up with angry red scrawls. Call plumber, call council, find cheap skips, check insurance. By dusk we were sitting on the steps outside the middle terrace, eating chips from greasy paper. My hands smelled like mold and disinfectant. My stomach churned at the thought of the money I didn't have yet, but would somehow need to conjure. You're not gonna sleep for a month, Aiden said through a mouthful of chips. Try a year, I shot back. He nudged my knee with his. You know I'll help you, right? However I can. I looked at him. Really looked. Why? His grin was crooked, the same one he wore when he helped me drag a washing machine up 3 flights of stairs in the flats. "Because you're the only landlord I know who'd offer squatters a day's grace instead of calling the police." I laughed, but it felt like crying. I leaned my head on his shoulder. He didn't move. We sat there like that until the streetlights flickered to life. ... The next few weeks blurred. Days at the terraces, nights at the flats, mornings catching catnaps on the bus in between. I stopped hearing from Hannah altogether, except for the occasional late-night voicemail, slurred demands for money, threats to show up with the kids, promises she never meant to keep. I changed my locks. I blocked her number. It felt like tearing skin off an old wound. One night, I found Aiden waiting for me outside my flat. He held up a bottle of cheap wine and 2 plastic cups. "Don't argue," he said when I opened my mouth. "You're drinking this." We sat on my threadbare sofa, knees touching, the taste of sour red wine burning my tongue. He told me about his job at the auto shop. I told him about Marlene's latest fight with her upstairs neighbor. He laughed when I admitted I'd slipped an apology note under her door. When the bottle was empty, he brushed my hair off my face, his fingertips trailing sparks down my neck. I didn't stop him when he kissed me. It felt like breathing for the first time in weeks. In the mornings, nothing was different, except everything was. He still fixed pipes and yelled at tenants who skipped rent. I still scraped mold off walls and begged the council to fast-track my repair permits. But at night, when we crawled into my bed, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this fight. One afternoon, I was scrubbing the lobby floor of the terraces when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, half expecting Aiden or maybe Marlene dropping by to meddle. Instead, there was Edward. Immaculate suit, wolfish smile. "Hard at work, I see," he said, stepping around my bucket like it was an inconvenience. I pushed damp hair off my forehead. "What do you want, Edward?" He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Word is, you've got squatters again." "I handled it," I said through gritted teeth. He crouched, meeting my eyes. "You're letting strays stay too long, Leora. You're not running a charity." "I said I handled it." He clucked his tongue. "See that you do. Investors get jumpy when they hear about unpaid rent. And when they're jumpy, I get jumpy." I wanted to splash my dirty mop water right in his smug face. Instead, I forced my voice steady. "I'm not your charity case either. You made your profit when you dumped this place on me. You'll get your cut." His smile thinned. "Careful, Leora. Remember who owns these deeds. You're just the caretaker." He left, his cologne lingering in the stale hallway. I sat back on my heels, mop water soaking through my jeans. For a moment, the weight of it all threatened to crush me. Then I heard Aiden's voice in my head. "You're fighting for something." I slammed the mop bucket against the floor. "Damn right I am," I whispered. When I got back to my flat that night, Aiden was there. He pulled me into his arms without a word. In the warm press of his chest, I felt my bones stitch themselves back together. A month later, I stood in front of the terraces, keys clutched so tight they cut crescents into my palm. The garden was cleared. The squatters were gone. The windows glowed with new glass. For the first time, I saw what I'd been fighting for. Rooms filled with families who'd pay on time, walls that wouldn't crumble in the rain. A future that couldn't be repossessed overnight. Marlene's grandson moved into one of the flats. She called me from her old place, just to say she was proud. I nearly dropped the phone. That night, Aiden and I sat on the top step of the terraces. The city spread out before us like a bruised promise. "Do you believe it yet?" he asked, nudging me with his knee. "Believe what?" He kissed my temple, his smile against my skin. "That you own this. That you deserve this." I didn't answer, but as the streetlights flickered on, I felt it, deep in my chest, where the old lies used to live. I was more than the girl they'd said would never own anything. I was Leora Pennington, and I was just getting started. When I stepped back onto the terraces that night, the street was dark but alive with possibility. The lamplight glowed warm against the fresh paint on the front doors. The weeds in the garden tamed into neat rows. I stood at the gate and touched the cold metal, the keys heavy in my pocket, the deed in my bag still warm from Edward's greedy hands. It was mine, all of it. Not a borrowed promise. Not a leash Edward could yank. Mine. I half expected Hannah to come slinking out of the shadows, arms crossed, eyes glittering with all the old words. You don't deserve this. You'll lose it. You'll run home crying like you always do. But the only thing waiting for me was the hush of the night and Aiden, leaning against the doorframe of my flat in the block next door. He didn't ask for permission. He just pulled me in, arms locked around my waist, forehead pressed to mine like he could anchor me to this new reality. I laughed into his chest, breathless, shaking. "It's real," I whispered. "It's mine." "Yeah," he murmured, voice rough. "It's real. And you earned every damn brick." We spent the night on the floor of my tiny living room, my papers spread out like treasure maps between us. He asked me what I'd do next. Keep these places forever? Fix them up? Sell them on? Buy more? Build something bigger? And for the first time, I let myself say the words out loud. I didn't know. I could choose. I could decide. The power was mine. Aiden grinned that crooked grin I loved, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. "Maybe start by taking a break. Sleep for once." I laughed, tears in my eyes. Sleep's for people who aren't terrified. He kissed me quiet. ... Morning came too soon. But instead of dread, I woke up to sunlight through the grimy blinds and the smell of burnt toast. Aiden was in my kitchen, cursing under his breath as he scraped charcoal bread into the bin. "Stick to fixing pipes," I teased. He threw me a mock glare, then softened. "You've got a meeting with the council today, remember?" I groaned, stretching. "Yeah, they want to talk about my plans for the garden out front. Like it's suddenly their business now that I'm on the land registry." "Hey," Aiden said, stepping close, toast crumbs on his hoodie. "It's because you're making this place better. They'll want to help you now." "Or bleed me dry with permits," I grumbled. But I kissed him anyway because he was right. It felt different now. Like I was the one with leverage for once. ... At the council office, they sat me in a cheap plastic chair under flickering fluorescent lights, droning on about community investment and green space and future development. For years, these people ignored our street, let it rot, let families slide through the cracks. Now, because I'd scraped the grime away with my own hands, they wanted to share in the shine. Part of me wanted to tell them to get stuffed. But another part of me, older, sharper, the part that had learned from Edward's games, smiled instead. "I'm happy to work with you," I said sweetly, pen tapping against my notebook. "As long as my tenants come first. We're not knocking down these houses to build some luxury flats for your mates, yeah?" They squirmed at that. One man cleared his throat. "Of course, Miss Pennington. It's all about the community." I forced a polite smile, but inside I was already sketching new lines in my mind. Where the fences could go, which patch of grass could be turned into a proper play area for the kids. I wasn't about to let them rewrite my story now that it was finally mine. ... When I got back, I found Marlene in the hallway outside 2B, a box in her arms. She grinned when she saw me, toothy and warm. "You missed your surprise," she said. "Tenants threw you a party in the courtyard." My mouth fell open. "What?" she cackled. "They're proud of you, girl. You gave them something worth living in. First time in years the hallway doesn't smell like dead rats." She handed me the box. Inside were homemade muffins, slightly burned at the edges, and a card signed with shaky handwriting. Kids' drawings of the block, flowers, a stick figure me with a big grin. My throat closed up. "Marlene, She clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Don't get soft now. You're our landlord. You've got work to do." ... Days bled together again, but they felt different this time, lighter somehow. I still fought with the contractor about new roofing quotes. Still argued with the plumber who kept ghosting me halfway through jobs. Still scraped gum off the stairwell when no one else would bother. But every door I knocked on now, people opened it with a smile instead of a complaint. They handed me cups of tea I didn't have time to drink. They asked if I'd eaten, if I was sleeping, if I needed anything. It wasn't charity. It was family, the kind I'd always deserved but never found inside the walls I was born into. ... One night, after another late meeting with the council, I found Aiden waiting on the steps again. This time he had 2 takeaway containers, and that grin that made the exhaustion in my bones soften for a second. We ate under the street lamp, legs stretched out across the path. He told me about a job offer he'd gotten, a chance to run a bigger garage in the city center. More money, more hours. But he hadn't said yes yet. "What's stopping you?" I asked, picking at my noodles. "You," he said simply. "You're here." I nudged his knee with mine. "Don't stay for me. Not like that." He caught my hand, kissed my knuckles. "I'm not. I'm staying because I want to see what you do next. Because I want to build something with you, Leora. Not just these bricks." I didn't say anything then. I didn't need to. The warmth in my chest did the talking for me. ... Weeks turned into months. The terraces started to breathe like they hadn't in decades. The council signed off on a new playground in the lot next door, funding I'd fought tooth and nail to secure. The paper ran a tiny piece about the girl landlord who brought a street back to life. Edward's name wasn't even mentioned. Sometimes Hannah's shadow still crept up behind me when I walked these halls alone at night, whispering that I'd lose it all, that I'd never be more than the girl who signed for someone else's mistakes. But then Aiden would find me, hands still paint-splattered from helping Marlene fix her skirting board, and he'd say, "Not today, Lo. Not ever again." One evening, after putting the final lick of paint on the last flat store, I turned the key, stepped back, and just stared. I remembered the first time I'd walked through that hallway, heart in my throat, certain I was setting myself up for ruin. Now the walls were fresh. The lights stayed on. The letterboxes didn't overflow with eviction threats anymore. I could hear kids playing upstairs, their laughter echoing down to me like a promise kept. Aiden appeared at my side, brushing his knuckles against mine. "Still think you'll lose it?" I looked at him, at the block I'd pulled back from the brink with nothing but grit and sheer rage at the world that said I couldn't. "No," I said, my voice stronger than it had ever been. "I'm done renting my life out to people who never deserved it." His grin spread slow and certain. "Good, because they're throwing you another party." I groaned. "I hate parties." "Tough," he said, slipping an arm around my waist. "Get used to people loving you, Leora Pennington. You earned every second of it." And as we stepped into the courtyard where fairy lights flickered like tiny stars, I let myself believe it was true. The courtyard buzzed with laughter and the low hum of an old radio perched on someone's windowsill. Fairy lights zigzagged overhead, casting everything in a soft glow that made the cracked paving stones look almost magical. I stood frozen at the edge for a heartbeat, watching kids chase each other around the benches while Marlene barked at them to watch their knees. She caught my eye, winked, then slapped a paper plate piled high with sausage rolls into my hand. "Eat," she barked. "You look like you've been living on thin air." I glanced around. Aiden was somewhere, probably helping Mrs. Hooper drag out more mismatched lawn chairs from her flat. The tenants I'd once thought would spit in my face now waved me over, patted my back, pressed cider cans into my palms like offerings. I thought of all the times I'd stared at these same people through doors that never opened more than a crack. The times I'd been the girl behind the mop, the girl begging for late rent, the girl they all thought would run at the first sign of trouble. I was still that girl. But I was more than her now. I let Marlene steer me to a plastic chair near the planter boxes we'd built from scraps. The planters had been Aiden's idea, a way to stop kids from tearing up the grass. Now, they overflowed with mint and rosemary and tiny flowers I didn't know the names of. "You see this lot?" Marlene said, jabbing a sausage roll at the courtyard like it was an army on parade. "They'd follow you to the moon if you asked them to." I snorted. "Don't be daft." "Not daft. True." She narrowed her eyes at me, her grin wicked. "Don't get soft now. You start crying, I'll whack you." I laughed so hard my ribs ached. ... Hours later, when the kids were herded inside and the fairy lights buzzed their last, Aiden found me sitting alone on the cold stone bench, paper plate balanced on my knees. "How's the queen of the courtyard?" he teased. "Exhausted," I muttered, but my smile betrayed me. He plopped down beside me, draping an arm over my shoulders. "You deserve every bit of this, you know." I nudged him with my elbow. "Don't start. Marlene already gave me the speech." Aiden's hand traced lazy circles on my arm. "Marlene's right. Look at all this, Lo. You built it. You made a home out of nothing." I looked at the flats, the terraces beyond, the shadows of curtains fluttering in warm windows. "What if I mess it up?" "Then you'll fix it," he said simply. "Because you always do." He pressed a kiss to my temple. I leaned into him, letting the quiet settle around us. ... The next morning, I found a letter shoved through my flat door again. For a split second, my gut clenched. Hannah. But the handwriting wasn't hers. It was a neat scrawl, the paper thick and heavy. Inside was a single line. "We're interested in your block. Call me." A number. No name. I stared at it for a long time, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. My first instinct was to tear it up, but something about the weight of the paper made me pause. Aiden noticed the look on my face when I stepped outside. He raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" I hesitated. "An offer, maybe. Someone wants to buy the flats." His grin faded. "You're not thinking about selling, are you?" I shoved the paper into my pocket. "No, but I want to know who thinks they can just show up now that the place is worth something." Aiden's eyes darkened. "Just be careful, Lo." I squeezed his hand. "Always. .. I called the number that afternoon. A woman answered, smooth voice, crisp accent, words sharpened like a blade. She told me she represented an investment group looking to revitalize promising pockets of the city. She said they admired my transformational work on the terraces, that my tenants would be better served by a company with resources. I laughed in her ear. "You mean you'd raise their rent, evict the ones who can't keep up, and slap a fancy name on my block?" A beat of silence. Then, "We'd make you a very generous offer, Miss Pennington." I nearly dropped the phone. "I'm not selling." "Are you sure?" she purred. "It would set you up for life." I didn't answer. I just hung up. ... Aiden and I sat up all night, the offer burning a hole in my head. He said all the right things. It's a trap. They'll gut this place. You can build more. You're worth more. But the old voices crept in too. My mother's hissed warnings about never owning, never holding on. Hannah's laughter in my ear. Edward's slick grin. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. I called the number again. "Not only am I not selling," I said, voice steel, "I'll fight you every step of the way if you come near my tenants. Try me." She didn't answer. I heard the line click. Good. ... For the next few weeks, the block felt like it was holding its breath. The investment group sent men in suits to loiter on the street corner. They asked tenants questions, passed out glossy pamphlets with promises they couldn't keep. Aiden and I tore every one of them down from the notice boards. Marlene came banging on my door one night, fists like hammers. "They came to my flat, girl." Tried to bribe me with free rent for a signature. "You sort this, you hear?" "I will," I promised, heat rising in my chest. I dug through old files, contracts, any scrap of paperwork Edward had left behind. I found loopholes, protections buried in dusty language. I called the council every day until they threatened to block my number. I learned what I hadn't known before, that power came from knowing exactly where the walls were and how to make them work for you. The suits came back once more. This time I was waiting. I stood in the courtyard, arms crossed, my tenants behind me like an army. "Not for sale," I said. "Not now. Not ever." They didn't try again. ... One night, after the last pamphlet blew away in the wind, I sat on the steps with Aiden. He had a scratch on his cheek from helping Marlene's grandson fix a fence that some idiot had kicked in. "You're bleeding," I said, brushing my thumb over the cut. He grinned. Occupational hazard of falling for a woman who'd fight the whole city. I leaned into him, my ribs aching with something like pride. I'd do it all again. He kissed me soft and slow. "I know." We stayed there until the streetlight flickered off, the block quiet, the fight, for now, won. We sat on those cold, concrete steps until the early morning birds started their chatter, the streets still and blue in that soft hush before the city wakes up. Aiden's arm draped around my shoulders felt like armor. His warmth seeped into my skin, the steady weight of him grounding me when my mind still reeled from the fight we'd just won. "They'll come back," I murmured, my voice raw from too many late-night arguments with men in suits who'd never scrubbed mold off a wall or haggled with a plumber at dawn. Aiden didn't argue. He just squeezed my hand. Then they'll find you waiting." I almost laughed. The girl I used to be. The girl who'd have hidden behind the door, heart pounding every time someone knocked. She'd never believe I'd stand here now, telling slick-talking developers to shove off while my tenants rallied behind me like family. And they were family. Marlene with her thunderous knock and fierce loyalty. Mrs. Hooper, who always had a tin of biscuits ready, claiming she just made too many when I knew she made them for me. The kids who skated down the courtyard paths I'd fought the council to pave over and keep clear. They were mine too. All of them. And they reminded me every day why I did this, why I couldn't let myself bend. Aiden nudged my knee with his. "When's the last time you slept in a real bed?" I groaned. "Don't start." "Come on, Pennington," he grinned. "The queen of the block deserves more than 2 hours on a sofa with rent ledgers as a pillow." I rolled my eyes, but when he tugged me up, I let him. We stumbled back into my tiny flat. Still a dump, but mine too, and curled up in my lumpy bed like it was a throne. He pressed his palm to my back as I drifted off, and for once, the sleep that took me was dreamless and deep. Dash, 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 dot, dot. I woke up to knocking. Not Marlene's hammer fist, or the dull thud of a courier with paperwork, but a slow, deliberate tap that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. Aiden stirred behind me, mumbling, "I'll get it." But I was already slipping into my boots, heart pounding. The knock came again. I flung the door open, ready to tear into whoever thought they could bother me before I'd even had my tea. It was Hannah. For a heartbeat, I thought I was dreaming again. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was a tangled mess, shoulders hunched inside an old coat I knew she'd nicked from Mum's house years ago. "Lo," she rasped. "Can I come in?" I didn't move. My fingers dug into the doorframe like I could hold up the weight of every lie she'd ever told me. "Why are you here?" She tried to smile. It cracked on her lips. "I just wanted to see you. The kids." "The kids aren't here," I snapped. "You know that. You left them with me so many times you can't even remember, can you?" Her eyes darted past me, taking in the hallway, the stack of files by the door, the old photo of me and Aiden stuck to the wall with tape. "You did all right then, didn't you?" she said, voice sharp as a knife hidden behind a compliment. "Why are you really here, Hannah?" She looked away, chin trembling. "I'm out. Trevor kicked me out. Said I'm poison. Said," she bit down on the words. "I've got nowhere, Lo. Just for a bit, just till I find something." Behind me, I felt Aiden's shadow at my back, silent but solid, the old part of me. Frayed, pliable, desperate to be needed, itched to say yes, to open the door wider, to drag her in and let her hollow me out all over again. But then, I saw the courtyard over her shoulder, the lights I'd fought for, the families who counted on me to stand my ground, and I saw her for what she was, a ghost who would swallow me if I let her. "No," I said. The word tasted like steel on my tongue. "Not this time." Hannah's eyes widened, her mouth working like she couldn't believe I'd done it. "I'm your sister, and I'll always want better for you," I said. "But not at the cost of what I built, not at the cost of me." She flinched like I'd hit her. For a moment, I almost reached out. Then Aiden's hand brushed mine, steadying me. Hannah's mask slipped. Her eyes turned hard, mouth twisting. "You think you're better than me now? Because you've got these dumps and a boyfriend to fix your messes. You'll end up just like Mum, Lo. Chained to people who'll bleed you dry." I didn't blink. "I already did. I'm done now." I shut the door before her poison could seep in again. Dash, 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 dot, dot. I sank to the floor, chest heaving. Aiden crouched beside me, his thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't felt slip free. "You did it," he said softly. "You chose you." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The silence tasted like freedom. Dash, 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 dot, dot. For days after, the block felt different. Like the air had cleared, like the weight pressing on my ribs for years had finally lifted. I threw myself into the work with a new kind of fire. Aiden teased me that I was insufferable now. The queen in her castle, he'd laugh, stealing kisses while he helped patch drywall or paint trim. Marlene threatened to charge me rent for all the time she found him hanging up lights or repairing old pipes on my behalf. "He's practically your live-in handyman," she said, cackling. "Put a ring on him already." I'd roll my eyes, but when Aiden caught my gaze from across the courtyard, that familiar grin turned the heat in my chest to something soft and terrifying all at once. ... It wasn't all perfect. There were still repairs that went wrong, pipes that burst, tenants who needed more than I could give. The council paperwork was endless, and the bank kept reminding me that debt was always nipping at my heels. But when I walked the hallways, when I heard the kids playing in the courtyard I'd once trudged through ankle-deep in trash, none of it felt impossible. One Friday night, Aiden and I sat on the roof of the terraces, a bottle of cheap cider between us. The city sprawled below, a patchwork of lights and noise that didn't scare me anymore. "Ever think about selling?" he asked, voice casual but careful. I side-eyed him. "Not you two." "Hey," he laughed. "I'm on your side, always. But I see you, Lo. Running yourself ragged. There's a whole world out there. Places you could go, things you could build." I took a sip of the cider, the bubbles burning my throat. "Maybe one day, but not this. Not yet." He leaned in, his forehead bumping mine. "I'd follow you anywhere, you know." "I know," I whispered. Dash, 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 ... When I lay in bed that night, I thought about his words. About what after looked like. Not just for the flats and the terraces, but for me. Maybe it meant more buildings, bigger fights. Maybe it meant a house somewhere green, kids with my stubborn jaw and his easy grin. Or maybe it just meant this. Quiet, warm, mine. The door creaked open and Aiden slid in beside me. His hand found my hip, his breath warm on my neck. I let myself believe, for the first time, that I deserved all of it, and when sleep took me, it was the easiest thing in the world. The days after Hannah showed up felt like the final shedding of old skin. I still woke in the middle of the night sometimes, half expecting to hear her pounding on the door, her voice slithering under the crack like smoke. But when I turned my head, it was Aiden's arm draped heavy over my waist, his breath slow and even against my shoulder. I'd watch the rise and fall of his chest until my pulse settled again. He never asked about her. Not directly. But when he caught me standing at the window, eyes tracing the empty street like a ghost might appear any second, he'd just wrap his arms around me from behind and whisper, "You chose you. You chose us." And I did. Every day I did. ... The block was thriving in its own ragged, stubborn way. The new fence around the little garden had been painted by the kids in wild splashes of color that made Marlene curse every time she passed it. "Looks like a clown's funeral," she'd mutter, but the way she stood out there in her slippers every morning, pruning the herbs, told me she loved it. I'd finally gotten the council to sign off on resurfacing the courtyard. The old cracked paving stones that used to trip up the kids were gone, replaced with a smooth stretch that doubled as a skating rink for Oscar and his friends. When I watched them zip past with wind-burned cheeks and laughter trailing behind them, I thought, this is mine. This is what I did. But I knew, deep down, that wasn't the end of it. One night, after we'd finished scrubbing graffiti off the stairwell walls for the third time that month, Aiden leaned against the banister, arms folded, sweat shining at his temples. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked, voice too casual to be casual. I dropped my sponge into the bucket, the dirty water sloshing over my boots. "Here we go again." He laughed, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Don't roll your eyes at me, Pennington. You're burning the candle at both ends." "I'm just saying, maybe it's time you let this place run itself for a bit." "And do what?" I shot back, trying to sound teasing, but the edge slipped through. "Book a holiday? Sip cocktails while someone else fixes the plumbing? Why not?" he said. "You made this place strong enough to stand without you watching every door and mopping every hallway at midnight." I bristled. "That's not how it works." Aiden pushed off the banister, stepping close enough that I felt the heat of him even through the chill that clung to the stairwell. "Isn't it? Or is it just not how you want it to work?" I hated how the words slid under my ribs and rattled there. because I knew he wasn't wrong. But letting go, even a little, terrified me more than any suit with a glossy pamphlet ever could. Before I could snap back, he kissed my forehead, the warmth of it melting the frost that had risen between us. "Think about it," he murmured. "That's all I'm asking." ... The next few weeks, I tried to think about it. I did. But every time I let my mind wander to the idea of stepping back, even for a day, I saw the old rot creeping in through the cracks. I heard Edward's voice, oily and smug. "You're just the caretaker, Leora. You don't own anything real." Except I did. I had the deeds, the contracts, the respect, the love. But the fear that it could all slip away kept my boots glued to these halls. One morning, Marlene cornered me in the courtyard. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," she barked. "You look like you've been smoking in your flat again," I shot back. She snorted. "We all have our sins. But listen here, girl. You've done enough." "What's that supposed to mean?" Marlene pointed her finger at my chest like she was jabbing my heart awake. "Means you need to let us live in what you built. Stop hovering. You think we don't know how to keep the lights on? How to chase out trouble? You gave us this place back. Now trust us to keep it." Her words cracked something open in me I'd spent years boarding up. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Aiden snored beside me, and I asked myself, what would I be if I wasn't the girl holding up these walls with my bare hands? The answer was terrifying and exhilarating. The next day, I called a meeting in the courtyard. Everyone came. Marlene in her housecoat, Mrs. Hooper with a thermos of tea, the teenagers who always pretended not to care but showed up anyway. Aiden stood behind me, his hand warm at the small of my back. I cleared my throat. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "But I think it's time you lot had more say in how this place runs." Marlene grinned like she'd won the lottery. I laid it out: a tenants committee, shared maintenance funds, schedules, a real plan so it didn't all fall on me the next time a pipe burst at 2 a.m. There was grumbling, of course. There always was. But by the time the sun dipped below the rooftops, we had names on a roster, and kids arguing about who got to paint the new sign for our block. Aiden kissed me on the temple when everyone wandered off to their flats, the promise of something lighter blooming in his eyes. "See?" he murmured. "Told you they'd have your back." I let myself believe it, just for a moment. ... Summer crept in on the backs of warm winds and long, late sunsets that turned the cracked concrete golden. The block bloomed in a way it never had before. The planters exploded with herbs and wildflowers. Someone, probably the teenagers, snuck out at night and strung up more fairy lights. When I asked who did it, they all shrugged with the same grin I'd learned to wear. One Saturday, Aiden dragged me out of the stairwell. "No fixing leaks today, Lo. I mean it." He packed us sandwiches, borrowed Marlene's battered old lawn chairs, and marched us down to the river that cut through the city like a secret vein. We sat on the grassy bank, watching the water catch the sunlight in shards of silver. He leaned back, hands pillowed under his head, eyes closed like he could nap through the end of the world. "This is nice," he said, voice muffled by the breeze. "It's weird," I countered. He cracked an eye open, grinning. "It's nice. Say it." I rolled my eyes, but the truth slipped out anyway. "It's nice." Aiden sat up, brushing a stray hair from my cheek. "I want this for you. For us. More days like this." "And what if it all falls apart while I'm gone?" I asked. "What if they—" "Then they'll handle it," he said. "And if they can't, we will, together." He pulled me into his arms, and for the first time, I let the river's hush carry the worry out of me. ... A week later, the committee held their first meeting without me. I hovered in the stairwell, ear pressed to the door like a nosy neighbor. I heard them argue about the garden, the paint for the railings, who owed who for repairs. But underneath it was something that made my throat ache: laughter, ownership, community. I wasn't the caretaker anymore. I was part of something bigger, something that didn't live and die on my shoulders alone. When they filed out, Mrs. Hooper winked at me. "Next time, bring biscuits if you're going to eavesdrop." I stuck my tongue out at her, and she cackled all the way up the stairs. Dash 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 dot dot. That night, lying tangled in Aiden's arms, I whispered into the dark, "Maybe I'm ready." His sleepy grin pressed against my collarbone. "For what?" "More. Whatever that is." His laughter rumbled in his chest. "Whatever it is, you'll own it, Lo." And I believed him. Maybe I'm ready. The words echoed in my head for days after I whispered them into the warm hush of Aiden's chest. They lingered when I made my rounds through the courtyard, when Marlene barked at me for forgetting to lock the bin shed, when the kids begged for new football nets for the garden we'd fought to keep green and safe. They lingered when I caught Aiden watching me the way he did now, like he was already picturing the world that waited beyond these bricks and broken pipes. Summer slid into the edges of the city. The block hummed with its own life now, a quiet steadiness that hadn't existed before. The Tenants Committee met every week, bickering over plants and paint colors, and who hadn't cleaned the stairwell on their day. It was beautiful. Imperfect. Ours. I still woke up some nights with old ghosts scratching at the inside of my skull. My mother's cold voice, Hannah's biting laughter, Edward's threats dressed as business deals. But when I turned over, Aiden was there. Solid. Real. A reminder that I'd crawled through every lie they'd buried me under and built something that no one could touch now. One afternoon, I found Aiden sitting on the steps outside my flat, a battered cardboard box at his feet. Inside were odds and ends. A spanner, a cracked mug I'd teased him about, a single houseplant with leaves drooping like they'd given up hope. "What's this?" I asked, wiping sweat from my forehead. I'd been repainting the window frames in 3B all morning. He looked up, that grin ghosting across his face. "My stuff." I raised an eyebrow. "Your stuff?" He stood, brushing the dust off his jeans. "I figure it's about time I stopped pretending I don't live here." My heart flipped, stupid and eager. "You sure you want to tie yourself to my leaky kingdom?" He stepped closer, eyes warm. "Lo, I've been tied to you since the first time you threatened to evict me and offered me a cup of tea in the same breath." I laughed, my hands fisting in his shirt. "Fair warning. The heating still goes on strike every other week. Good thing I know a guy." He kissed me, soft and sure, like he'd always belonged here. Dash 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 dot dot. It wasn't long before the block knew. Marlene cornered me by the garden planters the next morning, smacking her newspaper against my arm. "Told you to put a ring on him, didn't I?" she cackled. "About bloody time." "Marlene? Don't Marlene me, just make sure you keep him. He's the only one who can fix that ancient boiler of yours without making it worse." I grinned so hard my cheeks ached all day. Dash 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 dot dot. The next few months slipped past in warm, golden streaks. The block thrived. The kids outgrew the garden and begged for a bigger football pitch. The committee argued about whether to paint a mural on the side of the flats. Oscar suggested a massive portrait of me, which nearly made me choke on my tea. Aiden talked more and more about the auto shop in town. "I could buy in," he said one night as we sat on the roof, feet dangling over the edge. "Run it myself." "You'd be good at it," I said, and meant it. He nudged me with his shoulder. "We could even think about somewhere bigger, a real flat, maybe a house." "A house," I echoed, the word strange and shining on my tongue. "Yeah, a place with more than one radiator that works. A garden that's ours." The fear tried to creep in, that old whisper. What if you lose it all? What if you're nothing without these bricks holding you up? But when I looked at him, I saw the truth. I was never the walls. I was what held them up. And I could build new ones, anywhere I wanted. Dash 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 dot dot. It wasn't a clean break. Not at first. I still found excuses to fix things in the stairwell. Still woke up at 2 a.m., half expecting a knock on the door with bad news. But the block didn't fall apart without me. It breathed. It laughed. It grew. And when I stepped back, they stepped forward. One evening, as the sun sank behind the terraces, Marlene called the committee together in the courtyard. Kids perched on the low wall. Mrs. Hooper clutched her thermos like it was holy. Aiden stood beside me, fingers brushing mine. Marlene cleared her throat, her voice as rough and warm as the bricks we leaned on. "When this girl showed up," she barked, nodding at me, "we thought she'd run off like the rest. We thought she'd let this place rot. But she didn't. She made us believe we could do better. Be better. She jabbed her newspaper at me again, eyes shining. But she's more than this place now, and we've got her back. Always. The cheer that went up rattled my ribs. It felt like every door I'd ever shut, every bridge I'd ever burned, every lie I'd ever swallowed. All of it made sense now, here, with these people who'd become my chosen family. After, Aiden and I sat on our steps, knees knocking together. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a ring, so simple and lovely, it made my throat close up. You know, he murmured, you don't have to say yes. We can keep doing this exactly how we are. But if you want... I didn't let him finish. I kissed him so hard we nearly toppled backwards. When we pulled apart, breathless, I whispered, yes, always yes. ... We stayed in the block a few months longer, easing out of the old life like a ghost slipping from worn-out walls. The day we packed up, I walked every hallway twice, fingers trailing over the paint I'd scrubbed and repainted more times than I could count. I pressed my palm to Marlene's door, her cackled, "Don't you dare forget me," echoing behind it. Outside, the courtyard was alive with laughter and noise. The kids chased each other. The fairy lights we'd strung up ages ago still flickered against the dusk. Aiden laced our fingers together, squeezing once. Ready? I looked back at the block. My block. One last time. The girl I used to be might have been afraid to leave, but the woman I'd become knew better. Yeah, I said, my smile steady and true. I'm ready. As we stepped into our future, the echoes of everything we'd built rose behind us, not as a chain, but as a song. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.